More and more people are becoming familiar with the USDebtClock.org website. I've featured it on my channel probably more than any other channel of this type in the history of YouTube. Nonetheless, there's still a lot of mystery behind it. And we aim to try to make sense of that mystery, especially since the debt clock people have presented their secret messages. Yes, a secret window that pops up several times a week. But they've also added a lot of different data and calculations to this website. So let's get an idea of what is behind this and the origins. In this video, we're going to give you the most comprehensive outlook about the origins of the debt clock and who the people are behind it as we explore. I think what's amazing about the debt clock is there's references to gold and silver. Gold and silver being true money that have been money for thousands of years. And the people of the debt clock recognize that. And we see it in their secret messages. Now, since I started doing the series on the debt clock secrets being revealed, there has been references to gold and silver, as well as good money and bad money. In fact, new money versus old money, is one of the themes that run on the debt clock. And there was one of those that a member of this community sent along to me that gave some insight as to the origins of the debt clock in general, but not necessarily tying it necessarily to this website. And I love that my viewers find things that I can't find or have been relatively obscure articles. But what I'm about to share with you now comes to us from Norwegian Made, who shared with me this article from George Magazine. For those of you who aren't familiar with George Magazine, it was founded in the late 90s by the late John F. Kennedy, John F. Kennedy Jr., who died in a plane crash, I think, in 1999. But nonetheless, George Magazine continues on, and this article by Eric Snyder is probably going to give us the most comprehensive look, and we're going to go through it and try to see exactly what this is about. And this is very eye-opening for sure. So stick with me here. If you enjoy content like this, I hope you will consider subscribing to the channel and pressing that like button if you find value on what I provide here. And this article, I think, is quite eye-opening indeed. The U.S. debt clock's ascent to consciousness is the headline here. Money Creation and the Secret Windows into the Future by Eric Snyder. Almost 248 years after the signing of the Declaration of Independence in 1776, it remains clear that the majority of Americans today have almost no knowledge of the history of our monetary system. Boy, isn't that the truth. I think this is one of the good things about the debt clock for sure. It is an educational tool indeed. While the Continental paper currency was initially used by the Continental Congress during the war, our founders were brilliant enough to fix this monetary fallacy after the Revolution through provisions within the U.S. Constitution and the passage of the Coinage Act of April 2nd, 1792. By establishing a bimetallic standard, units of measure for our coinage as well as free coinage at the Mint in Philadelphia, our system was able to protect the people of the Republic, that's exactly right. We are a republic, not a democracy, from economic experiences we are now living through today, such as debasement, inflation, stagflation, which I think we very well could be at the cusp of stagflation again. Deflation, which is not talked about very often, but that's certainly something that could come down the pike. Gold and silver protect against that too. And we also think that we could see hyperinflation coming. With the loss of sound money principles over time, the fiscal well-being of the United States has continued to deteriorate to unfathomable levels. In December of last year, in 2023, credit card debt passed $1.2 trillion. Student loan debt surpassed $1.7 trillion. And U.S. unfunded liabilities surpassed a staggering $212 trillion. While these numbers are abhorrent, being able to watch them grow in real time has proven to be an incredible resource. Under the USDebtClock.org, a website that has piqued the author's interest for years, but especially in recent months, as the variable changes on the site could indicate a major change in our nation's monetary system is about to emerge. And here we have some photographs of what the debt clock used to look like before the age of the internet. So going back, the usdebtclock.org website is an expansive and enriched internet-based version of the popular Durst National Debt Clock in New York and the Peterson Foundation National Debt Clocks, which are installed in major cities throughout the U.S. The Durst National Debt Clock was the first of its kind. In 1989, real estate developer Seymour Durst decided it was important for Americans to reflect on the nation's $2.7 trillion national debt, and they spent just less than half of that in about a week and a half, not too long ago. Crazy. With only two data points reported. One, the national debt, and two, family or person shares of the debt. Both national debt clocks have stimulated much debate. The Durst clock was especially relevant during the Keynesian economic bust cycle of the housing market in 2008. While physical debt clocks continue to appear throughout the country, it does not appear that the Durst family and Peterson Foundation have any connection with the current agent of usdebtclock.org, who is John Gary Warner. Now we have a name to it. Wow, that's eye-opening. John Warner is no stranger to online data communication, as he co-owns CelebrityNetWorth.com with his son Brian Warner, CEO of C&W. John Warner is a native of Ohio, an Ohio University law graduate, and a resident of California, where he has practiced law for 54 years. In 2018, a New York Times article concerning C&W confirmed John Warner and Brian Warner's relationship. As a family that is active in sharing information with the public, it is no surprise that in July of 2019, Brian Warner also shared written testimony with the House Judiciary Subcommittee on Antitrust, Commercial and Administrative Law regarding the devastating effects Google in particular has had on web-based businesses, consumers, and the internet as such through its monopoly on online search. Given the entrepreneurial spirit of the family and Brian's public testimony condemning big tech, I was not surprised to find out their connection to the U.S. debt clock. By the way, as far as my knowledge is I don't think he's connected with the Marilyn Manson. While I did not receive any responses to emails or phone calls when I attempted to contact John Warner about the website, one can publicly find that usdebtclock.org was registered on the 3rd of November 2008, one day before the presidential election of Barack Obama, on the 4th of November. According to the domain registration, the site is set to expire on the 3rd of November 2025. Was the 11.3 launch date of the usdebtclock.org on purpose? Was what sparked the reporting about our debt-based monetary system on that particular date? Did Mr. Warner foresee the December 30th, 2008 Case-Shiller U.S. Home Price Index nosedive and subsequent global banking problems? Well, one has to wonder. So the author began to delve much deeper into the USDC history to try to learn as much about the site as he could. His first thought was to use the Wayback Machine to investigate the original layout of the website. How was money reported to the public? Were definitions provided to users? During this search, December 11th and December 20th, 2008, there were only dates and snapshots of the current website were taken. Of course, when I tried to open the snapshot, he could not download the images. It was not until September 2009 that a snapshot was taken of the U.S. debt clock partially functioning. You can see these are tables that included the largest budget items, financial meltdown, trade numbers, etc. In 2009, U.S. debt held by foreign countries was a mere, sarcasm noted, $3.4 trillion. Today, it is $7.7 trillion. In reviewing the website's numerical calculations, it is clear that the website developers have added a plethora of tables, variables, and attributes to the site over the past 15 plus years. Inherently, some of these tables were of a more interest to the author than others, and same with all of us. On January the 18th, 2010, the website added money creation table. This specific table is important because if you scroll over the category, the definition surfaces at the top of the page. I like that they do that, by the way, behind the USDebtClock.org banner. While the numerical values of the Federal Reserve monetary base did not populate, having the definition from a website is important. The Federal Reserve monetary base is the total amount of currency that is either calculated in the hands of the public or in the commercial bank deposits held by the central bank's reserves. So, to be clear, currency is not necessarily money. While it gives a currency, what gives a currency value? What gives the paper Federal Reserve notes value? What is money? Do leading intellectual CEOs and local and national politicians, including any congressional representatives, have any coherent conception of the history of our actual money? The word dollar itself was never written in the Articles of Confederation. It was only written in the U.S. Constitution 2 times. And it was clear that the dollar was a coin, not paper money. How many of our economic experts know that a dollar was defined as 371 and a quarter grains of silver based off the common colonial silver coinage at the time, the Spanish milled dollar? By defining the dollar as a unit of measure, the founders then provided ratios and measures for gold eagles and copper cents, which were the value of 1/100th part of a dollar, and contain 11 pennyweights of copper. Unfortunately, this knowledge was not passed down to Americans. And to be honest, the makers of the U.S. debt clock further exaggerated this misconception, initially by calling the printing of Federal Reserve paper currency money creation. For those interested in learning about money, he highly recommends Mike Maloney's Hidden Secrets of Money series, as well as Incredible Coins Financial School book written by William Hope Harvey, 1894. Well, I'm going to digress here because I disagree with Mike Maloney's definition of money. I believe Federal Reserve notes, even though they are credit-based instruments, they indeed have the attributes of money. It's just unsound money. And I'm using, by the way, Mike Maloney's definition of money as why I disagree with him. But nonetheless, he continues to wonder why materials like Maloney's and Harvey's requirements are not our standardized and nationalized expert educational system. Well, the point that Maloney makes, we all do agree with. Sound money is really the principle here that we should be going back to, and it was a great series for sure. But when did the U.S. debt clock update the money creation table next? From 2010 to 2019, the changes to the variable names and definitions were nuanced. However, on the 10th of April 2020, changes from the U.S. monetary base now to the U.S. Treasury dollars now could one day prove to be a significant monetary event. Was the change of the Warner debt clock a result of the March 27, 2020 Bloomberg article titled "The Fed's Cure Risk Being Worse Than the Disease" by Jim Bianco during COVID-19? Was it a result of the complex use of corporate law to hide who controls our currency? Scenario of the U.S. Treasury printing or coining dollars at a zero interest is very different. And of course, you can see here all of these things that were changes. The great research by this author for sure. U.S. Treasury dollars. So different from the Federal Reserve printing dollars with interest. In the images below, we should note that the website's change in the colorization of the tab of beautiful gold and silver. Why did the content creators select gold and silver hues? Could physical metal back the Treasury dollars? Do the developers and owners have an understanding of sound money? Interestingly, there is no longer a definition provided at the top of the page when one scrolls over the U.S. Treasury variable. Instead, you now scroll over the U.S. Treasury dollars now, and window surface with USA Treasury dollars and the image below. And there you go. There that is. We've actually looked at that as well too. Entire libraries could be filled with books about the historical significance of money being issued by the U.S. Treasury. But more importantly, when President Lincoln and President Kennedy decided to serve the interests of the American people by printing greenbacks and silver certificates, returning control of the nation's monetary supply to the people, it appears their death sentences were authorized. And there is some different details that he talks about there with other books and the like there. But let's talk about the major upgrade in 2023. As if the enormous changes to the money creation tables were not enough, the author continued to keep an eye on the U.S. Debt clock with an inclination that there would be more to the story. On September the 22nd of last year, the overall website layout changed substantially. This coincided with the passing of the $33 trillion U.S. national debt mark. The first change was a large spike in U.S. Treasury dollars in conjunction with the variable language changing from U.S. Treasury dollars now to U.S. Treasury dollars 2025, $1.52 trillion. Why the date 2025? And how does this site even calculate the U.S. Treasury dollars in the future? Furthermore, the website added a G7 GDP gold ratio with a blue background followed by a BRICS GDP to gold ratio with a red background color. The ratios are concerning giving the G7's influence globally to waning to comparison to the BRICS nations. This is especially true if we continue to weaponize the fiat dollar by funding foreign wars. As a response, the BRICS nations have united to challenge the Western hegemony with Brazil, Russia, China, and India, and South Africa, extending invitations to a lot of other countries that you see here. These additional nations are critical to the BRICS, especially Saudi Arabia, whose milestone pact with Henry Kissinger and Nixon helped stabilize the fiat dollars globally for 50 years. Yep, it was 1973 that the petrodollar was born because of the efforts of Henry Kissinger. But what about our currency supply? It is important to mention that the addition of the M2 dollar to the USA dollar ratio, now with a red and white-blue background, the following definition is directly from the site. How many Americans realize that they pay interest on the currency being printed by the Federal Reserve? It is coincidental that for the time of this writing, the ratio is currently 1777 to 1, and the Articles of Confederation were signed in 1777. The Articles of Confederation were clear in Article 1. The style of this confederacy shall be the United States of America. So the United States of America Treasury creating debt-free interest money, the truth is, I do not know. However, the timing of the reconstruction seems to be propitious, and while the linguistic changes, variable additions, and overall alterations to the website remain fascinating, the message added on the U.S. debt clock on October 1st is where the real learning began. The secret windows into the future. On October 1st, 2023, below the U.S. debt clock header, a message indicated the secret window would premiere that evening from 9 to 12. He loved that the developers added the don't tell anyone language. The secrets have now appeared every Sunday, Tuesday, and Thursdays, beginning since October 1st. In total, he has collected and attempted to, to translate 40 of these messages, with each presenting an investigative challenge. First was a verse from Matthew 21, 12 and 13, and Jesus went into the temple of God and cast out all of them who were sold and bought with the temple over with the tables of money changers. Scripture is always difficult to interpret. As there are many versions of the Bible, these interpretations and transcriptions have resulted in altered words and punctuation over time. There's one thing that the author has learned. It is the fact that grammar is essential. A simple capitalization of a word can contractually alter its interpretation and meaning. So what should we have take from this biblical secret window? The money changers were corrupt, and their existence within God's kingdom frustrated Jesus. Jesus said unto them, "It is written, my house shall be called a house of prayer, but ye have made it into a den of thieves." Unfortunately, as revealed by the staggering data on the Durst debt clock, the Peterson Foundation debt clock, and the USDC website, a den of thieves has also infiltrated America, making the truism of John Adams' words all the more pertinent today. But the U.S. debt clock elicits hope, as just as Lincoln and Kennedy printed debt-free, interest-free money, our leaders of the future seem poised to do the same. And I think I'm more convinced than ever that the Thomas represents, the great pamphleteer of the revolution, Thomas Paine. And maybe that is the comparison. That is the signature. Thomas X is the Thomas Paine, and the debt clock is the warning to all of America. Over the past 248 years, Many governments of nations have failed. What we have learned through our peril is that ethics can collapse, that individuals can do malevolent acts, and that regardless of the form of governance, the power to print unlimited paper money will inevitably result in societal degradation. It is time for Americans to return to sound money, and the consciousness of the debt clock can lead the way. What a great piece. Something indeed very interesting and fascinating. Now we know who's behind it. John and Brian Warner, and of networth.com, Celebrity Net Worth. Pretty amazing indeed. And this is something. What an eye-opening piece. And thank you again to Norwegian Mate for sharing it with me, and in turn with all of you. I'd like to extend a multitude of gratitude to each and every one of you for taking the time to watch. We now know the origins of the debt clock. And I want to encourage you to please rate, share, comment, and subscribe.